Welcome back to the Neurologic Wellness Podcast. I'm Dr. David Traster, and I'm really happy to be here with Aaron Delgrolice, a movement and fitness specialist who is in hybrid fitness training, who has a unique perspective on actually movement, fitness, exercise, because what he likes to do is integrate not just exercise and movement, but the brain, right? And everyone knows what we're really focused on is the brain, the neuroscience of the brain, and there's nothing more neurological about movement when it comes to the brain. The brain is designed to move our body. If we can't move our body, we can't move our heart, we can't move our organs, we can't move our glands, then we really can't do much of anything, right? And so you're seeing more transition into not just specialties for concussions or dizziness or, really disorders, but there's a real need for understanding the brain in the exercise world, in the fitness world, and to make it more translated into the general population. And that's what it seems like you're doing a really good job of. So thanks for coming. And why don't you give a quick introduction? That's something I missed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you explained it well. Yeah, my business is hybrid fitness training. The reason I call it that, we were speaking a little bit about that, is I'm combining movement with neuroscience, so that kind of hybrid approach of combining those two things. Because as you mentioned, a big part of my mission and what I've been doing, I've been a trainer for 20 years now, but over the last 10 years or so, my mission has been to kind of shift the paradigm a little bit of just basic movement, go to the gym, do your typical kind of strength building exercise. Don't get me wrong, strength is great, but as you mentioned, I like to approach the brain from, often a top-down approach, firing up the neurological systems because those systems are going to fire before your tissues will. So if those systems aren't functioning efficiently, then your body won't function as efficiently as well. And so, yeah, about 10 years ago, just out of my own necessity, was having, some personal issues, some emotional, psychological, physical issues. Was looking for different modalities and ways to heal myself, a little more natural methods, and I stumbled onto some companies that were offering neuroscience based approaches to movement and pain and stress management. And so I started studying that, looking into that, and that was like a very big light bulb moment for me. I was like, wow, how come the fitness industry isn't teaching some of these things? And this stuff is very fascinating to me. And then I started applying it to myself and then to my clients and getting some really great anecdotal progress and evidence of just seeing it in person. Now, obviously, the research and science is there, but when I started seeing how well it worked for me and my clients, that was when I really, started digging deeper and wanted to bring more of this approach to the general population because, as you mentioned, a lot of this is highly specialized. Oftentimes people don't get these type of treatments or movements or drills unless they've had, really bad concussions or strokes or have vestibular issues, vertigo, things like that. And what I realized is that everybody can benefit from these things, not, especially obviously if you've had maybe TBIs or you've had some neurological issues or some dysfunction, but also for pain management and just for movement in general. I found when I use this approach with my clients, they get more out of their sessions, their strength improves, their mobility improves, their pain is mitigated. So again, trying to bring it just from that specialized kind of world more to the general population and get that knowledge out there to help people be more resourceful too on their own and teach them these things to, help them facilitate their movement and their stress management and, just live a better lifestyle, whether that's more, pain-free or just helping clear up, some maybe neurological issues. It also, transfers to more than that, decision making, goal planning, emotions, so there's a big carryover effect, not just from the movement, and the body, but, the psychology and the emotions as well.
For sure.
So,
So let's talk about
um,
that because I was a
yeah,
personal trainer about 20 years ago, right? And so my aha moment in some ways was, you learn to be a personal, again, we talked about some personal trainers are way more educated than people think, right? And there's
yeah,
a real misconception about personal training because there's a wide range of people because in some ways the barrier of entry is low, but
yeah,
there's so much you can do to help people and there's so much education out there. And sometimes it's like, you don't need to go back to school for 4 years and drop $200,000. right? There's not real necessity for that, but there's a benefit that has bigger scope. But like I
Agreed.
know
Yeah.
my aha moment was like you learn to be a personal trainer, you learn how to put together exercises, you start learning muscles, tendons, ligaments, origin insertions, and then you start getting into movement, right? And then the two things that woke me up is I worked for a trainer who was very early on functional movement screens, in the
Mm-hmm. Yep.
world and all
Yep.
that world, and that kind of, brought me into why do we do these prehabs and these asymmetries come back? If they
Mm-hmm.
stop doing their exercise, like what is that? And then I got into West Side Barbell and looked at
Mm-hmm.
periodized versus non-periodized and started realizing, okay, so what is a max rep to the nervous system? What is, what's multiple reps do? What's multiple velocities do? And try to understand that a little better. And then that kind of opened me up to understand, wait a second, the brain is a lot more important than I would have thought when it came to exercising, right? And
Yeah.
so what we're doing is a little more specialized than even that. And so why don't you talk about first what's different about your approach and kind of the hybrid fitness training approach compared to other people, and how do you get people to buy in to some of the things you're doing because it's a little different than maybe people are used to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and great point. I think, when you get into this industry, as you said, that it can be a low barrier as a trainer to some degree, right? You can go get a quick certification, maybe you get hired at a gym. So there is unfortunately a big discrepancy when it comes to people that call themselves trainers and people that are actually trainers that have been doing this for many, many years, that are passionate about what they do and continue to learn and grow. And, as you mentioned, kind of evolve in your thought processes and how you approach, your way of training, or, your specialty, or how you're helping people. And very similar to me, I actually started at Equinox gyms, and I would say Equinox is a great place because they're big on continuing education and bringing new modalities and different things to the table, and allowing for, I got into kettlebells, and I got into like metabolic training with New Leaf, where, you're studying VO2 maxes, and then continuing just to, like, again, kind of stumble onto more, you said West Side Barbell, or some of these things. Like, I found applied movement neurology, or, I took Dr. Perry Nicholson, Stop Chasing Pain. I took his course, Primal Moves. So just of evolution when you're a trainer and you're seeking out new knowledge. And like you said, my biggest thing was, the more that I got into this, the more passionate I got about learning and wanting to bring, you know, new value and new information to my clients and to myself to help better serve my clients. And that's what I've been trying to do in my approach in my hybrid fitness training is, one, set myself apart from kind of your typical trainer. I've been doing this for 20 years, been studying neuroscience for 10 years at least. A little bit of an autodidact to some degree, where yes, I've been to school, I've taken courses, but my focus more has been my own self, doing online certifications, going to workshops, that type of thing. And I'd mentioned before we started this, trying to be a learn it all, not a know it all. I want to learn and not pretend like I know everything, because I certainly don't. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know it all, right? And so with my approach, I'm taking pieces of these puzzles from different modalities, from Z Health, from ICANN, from applied movement neurology, from other courses I've taken, movement courses, biomechanics, things like that. And now applying that to my movement base, but my movement base always starts with nervous system stimulation and looking at the neurological systems. The visual system, usually kind of first and foremost. The vestibular system, obviously very important. Proprioception, the cerebellum, is another area that I look at with people. So to answer your question, what I do with a lot of people, often I get people referred to me by word of mouth. So they have an idea of what I do a little bit. So they're not coming in necessarily blind to it, or not knowing, which is helpful, because I have had some people that, I've taken through maybe a few visual drills or a couple vestibular drills, and they're like, oh my, what is this? This is weird. Like, I don't understand why I'm doing this, right? Like, and I get that, and even still, to some degree, in mainstream fitness, it's getting out there a little more, but people see these things and they go, what's the point of that? What are you doing? Why is he doing this stuff? Or why is he, turning his head, or why is he playing with those tennis balls, or whatever it is, right? And so what I'm trying to do is educate people on why you do those things and how they're important. the people that come to me, the way that I can show them those is by utilizing those drills in conjunction with like movement or assessments, right? So one of the biggest things that I do with people when they come to me is like, well, one, I need to assess these systems. I need to assess your visual system, your vestibular system, your proprioception, your cerebellum. So there's specific drills and tasks that I'll have people do that are not only assessments, but they're also, drills to stimulate those systems. I also use those and utilize those in conjunction with either pain patterns, weakness patterns, maybe mobility patterns. So I'll have people either test a strength position, a mobility drill, a balance drill, maybe a movement assessment for pain, like internal, external rotation of the shoulder. And then I'll have them do some type of a visual drill, a vestibular drill, some type of a neurological stimulation, cerebellum drill. And then we retest those patterns and we see, did that help? Is it better? Is it same? Did it get worse? And then based on those assessments, those movements, and that type of thing, it starts to give me a roadmap. But it also shows people, especially when they first come into me, how powerful their nervous system and their brain is when you know how to tap into it and you give it the right stimulus, either, for better or for worse sometimes. And I don't, with people, to me, it's information. I always tell people like it's not like bad or good per se. It's like, let's just see how you respond. And that's going to help me decide, is this, stimulus going to help your nervous system in a way, or is it going to produce maybe a beneficial output or something that we're going after, reduce pain, improve mobility, help balance, whatever these, kind of threat signals are that are happening. And we can map that out and I can show people and they can experience it in real time. I can say, okay, oh, your right shoulder hurts. We'll check this, or, check abduction or internal external rotation. They're like, yeah, it's kind of tight when I go here. It hurts this. Okay. Well, let's do a convergence drill or a saccade or a smooth pursuit or a vestibular stimulation, and then have them retest. And very often I can find one or two drills that improve their movement and reduce their pain or improve their mobility. So then for them, it's now that mind body connection that goes, oh, wow. Okay. So something I just did made something happen. So now you're creating that emotional connection of benefit, right? And that instant plasticity where that wiring kicks in for a second, goes, oh, wow, that really helped. I didn't realize, like, and a lot of people are like, well, I don't know, understand how that works. It's magic. It's whatever. I'm like, it's, simply what we're doing is we're tapping into your brain and your nervous system, providing stimulus that hopefully can reduce these threat signals and allow for something to change, right? Reduce pain, improve mobility, improve balance, improve movement, strength, function. So yeah, so doing assessments, doing drills, and showing people in real time as they move their body that things get better with specific drills. That's one of the best ways, obviously, for me to do it, and to get people to buy in a little bit, because, and I get it. Some of these things can seem a little awkward. I have had a couple people that maybe feel a little insecure or a little weirded out. They're doing a convergence or moving their eyes, and I get it. I completely understand that. And one of my biggest things though too with people is not to push them either, or to force them, or take how they feel lightly. It's like, okay, well, let's try something else, or let's do something, let's there's other ways to kind of facilitate that, without having them get overwhelmed if maybe they're not comfortable, let's say with some of this stuff. But
For sure. And I think
um
that's a big point you mentioned because, like, I know when I was a personal trainer, the number one reason people would come to a personal train, no matter what you wanted to do, and no matter what your intention was, a lot of times it was aesthetics, or it was
yeah,
to lose weight, to
right,
build muscle, and it
right.
was a lot more visual of what I want to look like, right? And that has a psychological level to an extent, right? You want to look good.
Hmm.
And then the second one was pain, right?
Hmm.
And while they might go to a physical therapist or a chiropractor or osteopath or a medical doctor, the fact is a lot of people go to their personal trainer. And if
Yeah.
you're a personal trainer that is knowledgeable of how to reduce pain, you could be a more cost-effective person. You usually see people more repetitively. And so when you look at pain, it's almost a nice window to your point, because I think people don't understand that. Like I teach a decent amount and I teach to people who specialize in the musculoskeletal system, and they'll get mad at me because I'll tell them the musculoskeletal system is a secondary system to the brain,
Hmm.
right? It really, your
Yeah.
primary system is your spatial orientation. And
Hmm.
based on where you feel like you are in space, your muscles are going to adapt to that. So if you feel like you're falling more backwards, you're going to tighten up muscles to bring you more forward. And if
Hmm.
those muscles tighten up, they could affect your joints. They could have range of motion differences. And you can do
Hmm.
things like you said with your visual system, with your vestibular system to change your spatial orientation, change your posture and balance. And next thing you know, your range of motion, your elbow gets better, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's a
Hmm.
harder sell if someone just wants to look better. But if all of a sudden their pain's better, the range of motion's better. I just had a guy with pickleball elbow, we call it now. It's not tennis
Yeah.
elbow, it's pickleball elbow, and all of a sudden you
Yeah.
can do a couple things with his eyes. And he's been at 10 different trainers, 10 different chiropractors, physical therapists. You do
Yeah.
something with his eyes, and all of a sudden the pain goes away. Next thing you know, you're the hero doing something different, right?
Yeah.
Which makes it a big plus. And to your point, and that's I'm curious from your perspective, there's probably more research on exercise for mood disorders than any medication ever invented,
Yep.
right? And so I'm curious from your perspective, you don't have to go deep in your experience. What have you seen personally, like getting to exercise, changing your mood behavior with your patients, with your clients, with yourself? Because if you're hurt or you can't exercise, it's going to affect your mood. And if you can exercise, there's more research about, I mean, they look at the musculoskeletal system now as an endocrine system, right? And
Yeah.
it's more
Right.
about releasing different chemicals to your brain to make you feel better. And
Right.
so, what have you seen with your clients as far as mood changes, personality changes, getting them moving better, and getting using different vision drills to get them move better?
Yeah. Absolutely. And great point. When it comes to, often why people seek us out and seek help from trainers or therapists. And, luckily I've been able to carve out, kind of my niche and my business model where, people, again, I get a lot of either referrals or people find me on Instagram or word of mouth. And so, people aren't, luckily, I don't really train aesthetics. I don't care about that. I don't, I have people lift weights because strength training is important. And I understand, as you mentioned before, from a psychological standpoint, it builds confidence to look better, right? To lose weight. And if people want to lose weight and look better, that's a piece of the puzzle. And I have no problem with that. But it starts with, as you said, the brain and not just the musculoskeletal. And I feel like the problem with the fitness industry, especially, is it's become very, I mean, it's starting to shift a little bit now, but it was always separating the mind and the body, right? It's like just work the body, don't really pay attention to the brain or why these things are happening. Just look at it from a mechanical lens and try to force change through muscular change, which if your nervous system and your eyes and your vestibular system and those things aren't functioning efficiently, then you're going to have a really hard time getting out of those pain patterns or those compensation patterns and things like that. And the other thing, as you mentioned, when it comes to, psychological, emotional, physical, right? So the nervous system, as you know, doesn't know the difference between physical, emotional, psychological trauma. Trauma is trauma. And those things shift, right? If you've had psychological trauma or emotional trauma, that can create physical trauma, back pain, neck pain. I've seen it many times with, I always use one of my clients, all my clients really, but I had a client who she was really close with her father. Her father had passed away, and it had been a couple years, and she was still having, some emotional issues around that. And one time she comes into a session, I believe it was, her father's birthday was that day or the day before, and she starts talking about him, and she starts going like this. She starts grabbing her neck, and I pointed out, I was like, "Do you realize what you're doing?" She's like, "Oh my gosh!" Like as soon as she started talking about her father, her neck stiffened up, and she came to me because she was having neck problems and trap problems and things like that. And so what you see is, one piece of that, one recognizing that, I like to use the phrase, and I'm sure maybe you've heard this and other people have used this, your tissues hold your issues. So, emotionally, you can stuff those issues into your tissues, which can cause pain patterns. The flip side of that is physical trauma. If you've had injuries, especially, concussions or any head injuries, but joint injuries, muscle tears, things like that, that can then lead to emotional or psychological issues because now maybe you don't move the same, maybe you can't play sports like you used to, your quality of life is now affected, right? So it all kind of goes together. So what I've found with a lot of people, One, obviously, when we can start tapping into these neurological systems, which we know can regulate stress, especially the parasympathetic response, because very often people are in that sympathetic dominance of fight or flight with work and pain and emotions and trauma and everything that's going on in their life. So when we can start tapping into the nervous system and custom to them, because everybody's a little different how they respond to pain or how they respond to these traumas or the stimulus as well, right? So there's a very big customized part or a unique approach that I have to deal with each person individually and how they process these things and where they're at mentally or psychologically or emotionally. And so, what I found is obviously if you can start doing these things and helping people, one, be consciously aware of what's happening with maybe their pain patterns or their systems. Two, then showing them, hey, if we give your nervous system the right stimulus, we can reduce those threat signals, those emotional, physical, psychological threat signals. In turn, one, obviously that creates, that neurotransmitter chemical approach of like feeling better, right? So either endorphins or dopamine, or you're getting that the serotonin or whatever is happening to help them one associate nervous system stimulation, movement stimulation with feeling better, reducing pain, reducing threat, reducing trauma, then their whole attitude and approach to just movement and life in general definitely starts to shift and change. And unfortunately, a lot of people are stuck in that, excuse me, that pain pattern, that trauma cycle, and they haven't been able to see change or get out of it. And there's a lot of back and forth. And when you can start to see that, everything starts to change. Emotions, confidence, how they feel about themselves, how they approach their relationships, their work life, their goals, just daily life. And, one of the biggest things I've seen as well with a lot of my clients is, to your point, they come in and maybe they don't want to be there that day, but we do some drills, we tap into the nervous system, maybe do some breath work, do some visual vestibular drills, do a movement session, and they always feel better. Pretty much, 99% of the time, someone that maybe didn't want to come in that day or maybe having a bad day or whatever, and that's been one of my biggest approaches as well with this. One, this is a really great way to help people feel better, but you can do it instantly some cases or within 30 minutes to 45 minutes to where when they're done with the session, I always want people to feel better than when they came in, right? I want them to learn something, I want them to have some fun, and I want them to feel better, when they came in. And so, to your point with all that, pretty long-winded answer, but tapping into these systems, we can reduce trauma physically, mentally, emotionally. We can start to shift the pattern consciously of how people see their body, see their pain, see their trauma, and feel it. And when we can start shifting those patterns, one consciously, but also physically, and, or either emotionally or psychologically, then that's when you start to see people buy in, want to do it more. They start doing it on their own. They start making different habits. And that's a big part of my job too, is I facilitate, or I like to facilitate a multifaceted approach of not only when you come to see me, but how can I help you outside of here and give you tools and knowledge and resources, whether it's a video, a book to check out that maybe helped me, some type of information, a breathing drill, an anxiety drill, something that they can utilize on their own and continue to facilitate that progress and those processes to then start shifting their whole way of being and living and feeling, so.
For sure. And I think it's a good point that you make is that I think when most people think about exercise, I mean, look, I live in a community, they just built a new gym.
Hmm.
And the first thing that they're talking about is new machines.
Yeah.
Right. And it's right up there. And I get it. Like it's easy to use, it's safe, people understand it, they don't need help using it.
Right.
And there's a benefit, you've seen bodybuilder, there's a benefit using machine.
Hmm.
But the fact is, if you just sit in a machine, you reduce your need for stability, for balance, and you just
Hmm.
work on moving a joint one at a time, there's only so much of your brain that's going to be stimulated, right?
Right.
If you
Yeah.
could do more free weights, if you do more things on your feet, you involve balance, then you're going to
Hmm.
get more parts to your brain that are stimulated. If you
Hmm.
make those movements more complex, like there's a saying, the more simple the movement, the simple the brain, the more
Hmm.
complex the movement, more complex the brain. So if you start adding more complex movements, off-plane movements, balance exercises, you're going to get more areas of the brain. But if you add more breathing, if you add now visual areas of the brain in the back, you add more vestibular areas of the brain, you start adding more things to the brain, it could actually impact more areas of the brain that has a higher transference to psychological, emotional, and different things that you might not correlate movement with, right? And so the more you can vary these different sensory systems into your movement and the more complex the movement, the more impact you could have in the brain and the transference besides just making you move better becomes way greater, right? And I think that's a missed point a lot of people have is that they think of movement just as the body. And if they're
Right.
better, they can talk about the kinetic chain and the fascial planes, which is way better. But if
Hmm.
we can add other things to your exercises, even with a head turn, with an eye movement, with different visual activity, it all of a sudden it opens up the amount of brain activity and it can really make people feel asymmetrically better than the exercise. You think just a head movement is not that different, but the impact of that movement might last a lot longer and might actually have more transference to other parts of their life, right? Which actually is what you're
Absolutely.
kind of talking about. And so to
Yep.
that point, why don't you tell us a little bit of how you assess people? Because I think every day now people are looking for like a new nervous system hack, right? And you
Hmm.
look on social media, I know you've got a big following. It's almost like you're almost reduced to be like, okay, I've got this one post. I can only use so many words. I've got this one video, like how you're almost reduced to trying to fit into a model that kind of sucks, right? Because you have to kind
Right.
of reduce yourself to a hack to what
Right.
people want. But the fact is a hack is great, but it's got to be a hack that's unique, that's personalized, individualized to that person because what
Right.
looks like a hack to one person might not work for the next, right? And so
Absolutely.
what's kind of your take on your assessment? How do you look at someone and say, okay, this is what's going on with you. This is how
Hmm.
we're going to begin to work with your brain. Because again, I think people reduce not just the hacks, but personal training to why do I need a personal trainer? I'm just going to go to the gym and work on the machine, right? Or I'm
Right.
going to go even a physical therapist right now. A lot of people, I'll talk to me. Yeah, I went to the physical therapist twice, but I could do what they do.
Hmm.
They don't understand the progressions. Maybe they're right. Maybe it was a bad physical therapist, right? And so, what do you do for assessment of how to understand this is what's going on with this person, and this is what I need to do with this person versus the next person?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And just to kind of, touch on a couple of the points you made is that was one of the things when I work at Equinox, I would always fight them over as machines. They always wanted to bring more machines into the gym. And I'm like, no, we don't, we need space. I want people to be able to move. Machines are fine. Like you said, I get it. They serve a purpose, but I really don't have people use machines hardly at all. Maybe some cable systems, a little bit of that, but I'm a big fan of body weight calisthenics type training. That was why I really liked applied movement neurology because their approach was based around like gymnastic style training. Also like DNS, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization stuff where you're on the ground, primal movements, Dr. Perry, some of those people where, you're looking at more complex movements, right? As you were mentioning. And, so one of the things that I believe it was in the book, The Brain That Changes Itself, I think is where he talked about, or maybe it was somewhere else where he says there's more of your brain is dedicated to movement than it is even to language. And to your point as well, when you start incorporating either complex movements or movements with maybe a fixed gaze or some type of a vestibular drill, you're now getting more neurons in the brain to fire. You're getting more action in these systems that are coordinating that brain body, connection and those maps. And often what I find with a lot of people is their brain maps are blurry, so from their brain to their body, they have a blurry connection to their shoulder, their knee, wherever it is, due to either just, pain, trauma, maybe just not moving, learning bad habits, things like that. And so, what I really try to do, with people is, one of the biggest things is really assess them personally and take them through, various one, get to know what's going on, right? Like, okay, why are you coming to me? What made you call me or reach out to me or, actually take the time to set this appointment up, to show up, to sit in front of me So I want to get an idea of why they're there, but also I really try to take a pretty extensive history of what's happened to them throughout their lives with pain and injuries and things like that. Oftentimes they come to me for something very specific. Oh, I had a concussion, I have my right shoulder, my knee, my, whatever. So I will go to those areas. Maybe, let's say, for example, I had a guy that was been having shoulder problems for years. So one of my biggest things with people, one, because when they come in for something specific, you want to at least give some attention to that area. You don't want to just go everywhere else and it's like, yeah, but I'm here for this. Why are you, so you have to kind of weave in and understand that yes, there's other areas that are affecting your shoulder, but I'm going to help you with your shoulder. And so like the one guy, what I had him do, very specifically is we tested his range of motion and some of his pain patterns with his shoulder. And then I had him, I had him do some specific drills, some visual drills, but I always have them test and retest to make sure that, and again, is it better? Is it same? Is it worse? And I just want to know right off the bat, if you do something, you move. And generally, I've been doing this for a while. I can tell if somebody's movement improves pretty quickly, or if it doesn't, but I want to get feedback from them because that's the important part. What are you feeling? How is this, stimulation? How are you responding and relating to this? So then that gives me a better idea of, oh, okay, so you did that drill, you're feeling that that is better. It's like, okay, so now we need to show your nervous system, or we've shown your nervous system that you're safer to move in and out of that pain pattern by providing it very specific stimulus to either your eyes, your cerebellum, your vestibular system. So again, it's a very specific assessment, assess, reassess approach. And then I try different things because there's hundreds or more of neurological drills or things that I can do. I generally go after the low-hanging fruit and just do some of the basics, right? Convergence, fixed gaze, smooth pursuit, VOR, some type of vestibular, saccade, and then like I said, test and retest and see if we're kind of heading in the right direction in terms of how the nervous system is responding. Now, obviously, if the nervous system doesn't respond well to that stimulus and something maybe gets worse, that's a whole other issue, something I make a note of and something that I will explore as I move forward with that person. But generally, in the beginning, it's like, okay, how can we tap into specifically what you need in your nervous system? And let's see if we can find a few things that your nervous system responds well to and start facilitating that healing movement, down regulating those threat responses, and then start to incorporate that with what we were talking about, a little more complex, getting down, up and down off the ground, doing some type of a balance exercise, maybe a crawling pattern or something that involves a little bit more coordination, brain coordination, visual, vestibular activity, to start bringing those systems online. Again, reducing the threat signals of the nervous system to the tissues and, showing in a controlled environment that, hey, you're safe, you're not in danger. We can load these tissues, we can do these movements, but it all starts with this specific stimulation to your convergence wasn't really great. So very often one of the ones with people specifically too is like a convergence, and one of their eyes maybe isn't converging as well as the other. So then I'll have them do a specific just convergence with the eye that's not moving as well. And that's one of the biggest ones I see after they do that, get the eyes to move a little more symmetrically, get that one eye that was maybe a little less efficient. All of a sudden their movement opens up because now again, we've reduced that threat signal, and that stimulus to the nervous system is it's better input going into the system. So now the output is better. And so yeah, what I do is very specific, look at, and then again, the drills are assessments too, right? If I'm looking at a fixed gaze and I'm seeing the eye wiggle or or nystagmus or something going on, then that leads me to believe, okay, well, they have an issue with this. So that's something we'll have to look deeper into as we move forward. So it's a constant, and I do this with all my clients. It's not just the first time I see them, it's every time I see them. Every time they come into a session, because they might come in, maybe they haven't slept well, maybe they're hurting more that day, maybe they've got something emotional going on. So every time I see them, is some kind of assessment, reassessment of their nervous system, of these drills and what they're responding to. And sometimes I have to shift that. I have to shift what we do and shift how I stimulate those systems or the movement that they're going to do with those things. So, but yeah, again, combining all those things, assessing, reassessing, and then seeing very specifically how their brain and their tissues and their nervous system is responding to the stimulus and to the drills.
For sure.
So,
I think that's key is the assessment reassessment, right? Because
yeah.
you could tell whatever story you want, right? The
Mm-hmm.
people that buy in, the key is that they know it worked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact, like you said, like it's if your right eye doesn't come in, well, most likely your brain's going to know your right eye doesn't go left. So what are you going to do? You're going to probably move your head right so your eyes go left,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then if you move your head right, your body's going to shift, then your trunk is going to shift, and then your
Mm-hmm.
shoulders are imbalanced and your hips are imbalanced. Then you got different tone down your knee, down your ankle. And
Yep.
before you know it, you have all these asymmetric imbalances, these muscle imbalances that you can foam roll, you can stretch, you could strengthen, and that's going to work until you got to look left. So you got
Right.
to, then all of a sudden it's getting imbalanced again, right? And that's, like I said, that's
Yep.
how I started is trying to figure out why do some people do these prehab exercises and stay better? And these pro athletes too, like, these high level people, and then all of a sudden they stop doing it for a week, it all comes back. Like, why? Like, it shouldn't need every day to do these things for some people. And then you realize, well, maybe it's all secondary to their vision. It's
Mm-hmm.
all secondary to their inner ear.
Mm-hmm.
You brought up a good point in brain maps. I think people don't understand you can't move your body if you don't know where it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then people might not know that in your brain you have a homunculus that actually gives you a map of your body. Right?
Right.
Talk about Deutsch's book, the brain that heals itself. He's got some good information there. But we
Mm-hmm.
know that these brain maps change. Like in 2 weeks from now, the map in your brain is gonna be different than it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And we know pain almost like erases the map, right? And so like
Yep.
in your back, your low back has like a very small map to begin with, right? Which is part of the reason you have terrible low back pain. But every body part, pain is gonna kind of decrease that. And I think what people don't know is you could do things with movement to increase the map, obviously. You move your hand more, it's going to give you more awareness of your head. But you look at
Mm-hmm.
like monkey research, 1 hour of eye movements can change those maps. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So just doing saccades for an hour, not straight, but doing saccadic exercises in certain planes and certain movements can actually change your body representation.
Yep.
But the key is the assessment because you can sit all day and tell someone, I'm going to do an eye movement to make you feel better. They want to actually see it, right? And they will actually feel it, and they will actually feel that it's better.
Right.
Um, so when you look at what you're doing every day, it seems like you're probably doing something different than the trainers next to you, right? And you probably work at a gym, right? And everyone has,
Yeah.
we talked about that before, like everyone's got their own technique that they really live and swear by.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what's different about what you do, what looks different, and what feels different? Because obviously there's probably other clients looking at what you're doing versus what they're doing and figuring out like why am I not doing that, right?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting too. You mentioned that because I was telling you the gym I'm at now is a private training gym, and most of the trainers there we're all highly specialized, and yeah, typically we tend to kind of drift towards either what speaks to us or something that we've just learned and continue to learn. And I try to be a little bit, that's why a little bit hybrid as well, where I don't try to be too dogmatic, but I do think that again, the nervous system, the brain, if you're not training those, and we mentioned Dr. Cobb's eHealth because I'm a big supporter of that, and go through those certifications, and it's one of those things where I guess people just they kind of don't understand it, or when they see it, it just doesn't quite register. Because to your point, when I'm at the gym, people see me doing those things. Luckily, again, a lot of the trainers there, they do different things. The owner of the gym, he likes to joke like this is the strangest gym, in LA, kind of, we're in LA, or in the country, where if somebody walked in and they see me and my clients over here doing this stuff, and another client over there doing like an Eldoa pose and some different things, they go, oh wow, what is this? But to your point, when I think it, at least for me, is like I practice what I preach. And so when people see what I do with the eye drills, or they see me doing that with my clients. And I've had even some of the other trainers where we've worked together where I'm like, look, I think, what you have is valuable, right? And what I do is valuable. I think you should be combining these things, right? So, some trainers are a little more open to it. Some clients definitely see it and go, ask their trainer what are they doing? What's that for, right? And again, people still, because it's not mainstream and it's still kind of highly specialized, or they think it's just for athletes. To some degree, people still kind of just don't, I guess, understand it, which is fine. Um, so again, my biggest thing is I'm trying to get that information out there. I'm trying to just show what I've learned and help people, maybe start to try these things out and realize that there is actually benefit, there's science, there's a reason for these things. And it's not just some goofy looking drill that, that I'm trying to do to, I guess, stand apart from everybody or make myself seem different than everybody. I'm doing it because it's powerful and it's beneficial, and it actually, you know, serves an important purpose. And again, I've gotten really great results with myself and with my clients from it. So people definitely are inquisitive. They see it, and it's a couple of the other trainers have started to utilize some of these things as well, and started to go, okay, yeah, there's definitely value. One of my buddy I was telling you who does Egoscue, so he's also an MMA guy. I did MMA for a long time, and he got popped in the eye, and his eye was a little blurry and a little off, and was kind of bugging him a little bit. And so I had him do a convergence, and had him do just a couple like easy drills, and instantly it made his eye feel better and kind of clear up a little bit. And he goes, oh wow, like, so then he started doing that stuff with his fighters and started utilizing some of those things a little bit more. So some of it is, if you're just seeing it from the side, it's going to look a little funny. You may not understand why to do it, but if you can actually do it and feel it, or be inquisitive and maybe be a little more open to trying these things, and then now getting that connection, that, oh wow, something's happening here, this is producing some type of an effect, then obviously that's how you can get people more interested in it, or more willing to want to apply that to their either daily life, or their movement practice, or whatever it is. So
Well,
it's
let me ask you a few more questions.
yeah.
And again, this has been going on forever, but you got different views in the fitness world.
Hmm.
And I'm curious of your balance, right? Because some people are just load them up,
Hmm.
right? You're not going to get anything done. All the functional training is nonsense. Just
Hmm.
throw weight on them, squat, deadlift,
Hmm.
bench. You know what I mean? Like just load the body and make the body work the resistance.
Hmm.
Then you're seeing more and more over the last 20 years, at least since I've been watching, of more functional training, right?
Hmm.
Putting people on Bosu balls or foam pads or single leg exercises, or doing things that's not so much about total load, but much more about full kinetic chain kind of integration, right?
Hmm.
And now what you're doing is almost going even further and saying, not that you're not going to do that,
Hmm.
but not just load the body. Let's do things for the eyes, for the vision, for the inner ear. And I'm not
Hmm.
even loading the body sometimes. I'm just working on their brain
Hmm.
independent of throwing weights on them.
Yep.
So, from your perspective, when you work with a client or a trainer or an athlete, where's the balance between throwing weights on them, between body weight exercises,
Hmm.
between balance exercises, between eye movement exercises? Because I was always the believer that people go too extreme, especially in the fitness world, right? It's like
Yep.
all or nothing, But the reality is there's a balance. Each person has a different balance where
Hmm.
you need to sometimes load them, you need to sometimes do body weight, you need to sometimes work on their vision. And so with your clients, where do you draw that balance, or how do you play that game as far as how much to throw weights on them versus body weight versus eye exercise, etc.?
Right. Yeah, and it's a great point, and it goes back to a little bit of what we were talking about before when it comes to like assessing and working with people individually, right? So it's an individual kind of case by case basis, how I approach, what I'm going to do with that client, but it's very similar in the sense of my total approach to my training sessions, right? So generally what I do, with all of my clients is they come in and I have them start with usually a breathing drill. So I usually have them do like a banded breathing drill. And then I have them do some type of a kinesthesia drill, or a posture, like um, a posture drill, like a heel drop or something along those lines. And then I have them do the neurological drills. So I always start with tapping into the nervous system, because oftentimes people come in, they're frazzled throughout the day, whatever's going on. And so what I want to do is I want to kind of bring the nervous system down a little bit, create a little bit of safety. So I find that doing some breathing, some type of a breathing drill, either a hypoxia drill or just a banded breathing, something to calm the nervous system down a little bit, regulate that, start getting oxygenated blood to the brain. And then I generally will then go and have them do all of their vision and vestibular drills. So I have them go through a full sequence of, maybe about 10 minutes or so, 10 to 15 minutes of, convergence, fixed gazes, saccades, VORs, and depending on the client, I have them do it in different positions. Some of my clients, their balance isn't great, so I have to adjust their position. Some clients, I have them do it in a sharpened stance, sharpened Romberg with the feet, which is much more challenging. Some of them I have them do in a gait stance because, maybe one side they have some knee or hip issues and I want to load that a little bit. So then I'll have them go in a gait stance and do their drills from there. So that is a little specific to, where they're at physically, what their issues are, are they, how capable they are. So then I go through the neural work and the vision work, the balance work for about 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes or so. And again, like I said, various ways to do it. Some people I have them do it walking, some people I have them do it standing. And again, working on their feet positions depending on what their capabilities are. And one of the biggest things that I do with that, that I like, Dr. Cobb talks about, is safe but challenging, right? So I put them in a safe position, but I also want it to be challenging. It shouldn't be so easy that they can just, they don't have to think about it. I want some level of challenge, but again, some safety, right? So then after about, maybe 10, 15 minutes of that, then I have them go into some type of movement prep, either like banded proprioceptive work, having them do like some banded, maybe shoulder mobility drills or cerebellum type figure eight drills, or some wrist stuff. And often I like using super bands to add a little bit of load and a little more proprioceptive awareness or structural feedback on maybe the area that we're trying to do. If some people are just totally deconditioned and they're not used to these things, then I just won't even have them use a band. I'll just have them do, maybe some cars or some basic dynamic mobility, or I have them get on a mat and I do some ground-based work that kind of hits all the fascial points of the body, all the different planes of motion. So we'll do, some wrist rocking, some spinal waves, some glute rolls, some things on the mat, some dynamic, somewhat complex mobility. So again, start integrating movement into those systems. After we've activated those systems, we now integrate with movement and still continuing to activate those systems. Like I said, through the different planes of motion, oftentimes from the ground, from ground-based movements. And then from there, I'll start to work them into more standing-based movements, more dynamic calisthenics, body weight stuff. I like combining, like I'll have them do like lunges with maybe like vestibular drills or visual drills. And then some people I will load with weights. I'm a big fan of kettlebells. I've been using kettlebells for as long as I've been a trainer, for 20 years. So I will give them some load, again, dependent on the person, where they're at, what their ability is. But I do like throwing in some loaded movements after we've stimulated the nervous system, integrated into some movement, got some activation as well. Do some movements, some complex movements, getting up and down off the ground, crawling, rolling, things like that. And then I like to integrate some type of strength training, whether it's, continuing the calisthenics type movements, adding in some kettlebell movements, because kettlebells are a great way to add load and a very versatile tool. I always said that, if I had to pick one piece of equipment, it would be a kettlebell because there's so much you can do in a little space, and you can do a lot of coordination. You can hold them a lot of different ways. You can add complex movements with them. And I'm a big fan of isometric training as well. So I really like to utilize isometric, especially with my more deconditioned clients or clients with pain. We're seeing a lot of good response with isometric drills and pain responses, reducing pain or getting rid of pain, obviously strengthening tissues, challenging joints and loaded positions, but in a safe way, through the isometrics. And then I also like to involve a little bit of dynamic work as well, because or some type of maybe a plyometric. And again, it's going to be based on the person's skill level and what they're capable of. But I think everybody should be doing a little bit of speed work or plyometric, because I'm trying to, again, go after everything, right? As much as I can in 60 minutes. And so it's even though it's similar in the way that I do it, it has to be individual or custom based on, again, person's skill level and all that. So start with neuro drills, 10, 15 minutes, neuro balance, that stimulate those systems, go into some movement prep, some mobility, some activation, then go into locomotion, strength training, isometrics, plyometrics, things like that. And then maybe at the end of the session, I'll have them cool down with a postural drill or a breathing drill or something to kind of, bring the nervous system back down again. And then I like to utilize some of the drills with either in conjunction, like I said, maybe doing like hypoxic drills with movement, doing vestibular or eye drills in conjunction with movement, so utilize those in the sessions as well. Um, and then, that's kind of my approach is hitting all those angles. And then again, like I said, kind of, we bring the nervous system down a little bit as you go into movement and exercise. It's a little bit of an undulation. We're going to go up and down a little bit, because when you start moving and working out, you're going to go into fight or flight a little bit, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. But then I like to bring that down with maybe in between, I'll have someone do a smooth pursuit, or a saccade as they're resting. Bring those systems, tap into the nervous system, calm the heart rate, calm the system back down, and then go back into movement. So that kind of push pull, kind of undulating approach, within the session. But yeah, that's how I approach, all my sessions. Is I do think some load, some strength training. I'm not a fan of what you were talking about, just the blast people. Like, I like to say stimulate, not annihilate. What we're seeing is, and don't get me wrong, some people really enjoy hard workouts, and they're used to that. Maybe that's what they thrive off and they enjoy doing, and nothing wrong with that. But most of the people that come to see me need kind of the opposite. We need to start, build their foundation back up, start on the ground, start more gently, start strengthening the response of the nervous system and adding load to the neurological and nervous system. So doing those drills is very much like training your muscles, but you're training, obviously, the neurological system. So you're putting load or stimulation into your eyes, right? I mean, your eyes have muscles that need to move. We need to mobilize and strengthen our eyes. We need to strengthen those systems as well. And so, I think that's where it gets a little misconstrued, is people don't realize that by doing those drills, it's strength training for your brain and for your nervous system and for your eyes and your vestibular system. Now you've done that. Now you're going to get more out of your body. So then you probably could lift heavier, or do more, or have more capacity, and your system and your tissues feel safer, and you can get more out of your training. But, I'm not a fan of the, just kill yourself, do more and more and more, force the joint into position, just do a ton of reps, and just, you should, be picking yourself up off the floor when you're done. And if you're not, it wasn't a good workout. Like, I think the research kind of shows that most people, that's not really beneficial. And in the long run, it's actually does more harm than good, usually.
Yeah, because at some point it's going to lead to injury, right? If you're not, at
That,
some point you're going to overload, right? Not
that
recover.
too.
Uh,
Exactly. Yep.
so let me ask you this final question. You've been doing this for 20 years. You've evolved as a trainer, as a fitness expert, as a movement expert. What are you most excited about over the next 10 or 20 years? Where do you think things are evolving, or what are the things you're most excited about? You think things are going to progress?
Well, I think we're starting to see it now already, obviously with information and social media, and the ability to kind of access information and knowledge at your fingertips, that's definitely getting more of these, kind of specialized approaches out there. But what I'm really happy to see is people, one, taking more interest in just their overall wellness approach, especially in the fitness industry, where it's not just go to the gym, work on machines, build muscle to look good, right? Now what we're seeing is people are looking at breath work, they're looking at meditation, they're looking at what we're talking about, what we do, the tapping into the brain, into the nervous system. We're looking at sleep, we're looking at nutrition. So I'm excited to see that progression where people are looking at health and fitness as an overall journey and a multifaceted journey to help them live better lives through many different ways. Like I said, through sleep, through movement, through supplementation, through breath work, through meditation, and people kind of gaining their power back and realizing, like, I don't just have to go to a gym and work out for 2 hours to be healthier. I don't, there's many ways to do this, and they're starting to see that, there's more knowledge and resources out there to help them. You bring up a good point. In the next 10 to 20 years, I don't know, obviously with apps and AI and a lot of these things, I still don't think that, yes, you could go on YouTube, yes, you can download an app, and will you get some results from that? Maybe, if you're dedicated enough and consistent enough, you might. Are you going to be missing a lot of pieces of that puzzle that a specialist or somebody right in front of you, or that works with you one-on-one and can see you and provide, that cueing, that touch, that information that they've acquired over time? You're not going to get that same thing, I don't think. So I think that, we'll see more people thinking, obviously utilizing these tools, apps and AI and things to help them, which is fine. If it helps you and it betters your life and it provides some benefit, cool. But I also think that, people are still going to need, us, this one-on-one approach, and the ability to, one, connect obviously with somebody, but hire a professional. I always tell people, if you want something done right, I don't care what it is, hire a professional to help you acquire the tools and knowledge that you don't have on your own. And I'm hoping that, over the next 20 years, people will start to realize, like, maybe I should hire a professional because I really want to get the most out of this. I understand it's a time and a money commitment, but, again, hopefully we can see, even with the advent of AI and apps and all this, technology, that we can still see people, seeking out our specialized help, and that us in the fitness industry are expanding. What, obviously you guys are doing this more, and these other companies now, I feel like, are starting to get more of a recognition in, again, like I said, we were talking about general populations and stuff. Obviously people who have specific conditions and need help, they need to go see, go to places like yours. And I've sent people, your guys' Instagram and website. There's another guy in Atlanta, Neurosolutions, Brad, and Dr. Ryan Cedarmark, and those guys that are doing, so I send people if they're wherever they're at. So my biggest thing, over the next 10, 15 years is just continuing to educate and bring this training to the masses, and to help people that feel like they were lost causes. Or you see people that, I've seen testimonials with you guys and Neural Solutions and some of those, where the doctors are like, oh, well, they won't talk or they won't walk, or you've had a concussion, you just got to live this way the rest of your life, or you have vestibular problem, whatever. I want people to learn and show that they can get better, through companies like you and me and us. And that's what we need to expand on in the next 10 years, is helping people facilitate their own healing, but doing it, in a specialized professional, way. So, I hope people just learn more, grow more, and seek out this type of, training and knowledge and resources, and hopefully don't rely too much on, AI and the apps, to think that they can kind of do it all themselves. But,
For sure. I think
you
what
know,
I've seen
we'll
is, to your
see.
point, is like, and part of it's me, right? Because I'm not big on social media.
Hmm.
We've kind of avoided being big on social media, but the fact is, you got to feed the algorithm information
Hmm.
to ever make a change, right?
Hmm.
Because if you're not doing it, it's not going to make the shift. And what I've seen, a lot of my patients that come in, and it's not you've got to know what AI knows now, right? It's
Hmm.
almost like it's beyond Google, right? And because
Right.
these people are well educated, but it's not they want to rely on AI. They just they want to find someone that's educated enough,
Hmm.
right? So they can rely on a human being who at least knows what AI does, and they just want to bounce that off. Like, I read this, is this true?
Right.
What do I do with this? Right? I read the vestibular system is important. I want to use it, like how do I use it in fitness, right? And so it seems like there's always gonna be that personal touch, but you've got to know more as a trainer or as
Yep.
a doctor, because if you used to be a Google doctor, if you didn't know what Google knew, you were dead. But now
Yeah.
with AI, first of all, AI is not always correct, to your point.
Oh, absolutely.
But at the
Yeah.
same time, if you don't understand what AI knows, you're going to be put down right away because that seems to be the new authority. And then you got to know what AI knows, but then you got to take it next level and know how to utilize it because
Right.
AI can't utilize it. It's just going to give you information that's self-serving, right? It's
Yep.
not going to be able to utilize it. And so, final thing, tell me, for people to learn more about you, about your company, to contact you, what's the best way to learn about you and how to contact you?
Yeah, so your point with social media and that type of thing is, I've been a little reluctant as well. I'm not a huge fan. I've never. I'm kind of surprised that I've been luckily in a way of the followers I've gained. I never really set out to do that. I don't consider myself an influencer. I don't want to be an influencer. I got in. Reason I started doing Instagram and started doing these things was, as we mentioned before, was to help people first and foremost. That's why I became a trainer originally. Was I want to help people. I've had a ton of injuries myself. I've been in some dark places. I've had anxiety. I've had depression. I've had a lot of things that I was able to heal through nervous system training, through movement, through nutrition, through all these meditation, breath work, all these different things. So my biggest thing with social media and my reach was just trying to help people. And if it was one person, 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people, I'm cool. I don't, not that I don't care, but I'm not striving to be. That's not. I don't care about amassing a ton of followers. But if I can help more people and more people follow me, great. So what I've done is the way people can find me. One, Instagram, great place. You're only going to see pieces of what I do, and like what we were talking about with AI, right? You can get the information, but can you apply that information now? So that's the thing that's going to separate us apart is people can come to us with that information, but it's like, okay, well, how do I apply this information, right? So part of what I'm doing with my Instagram, and it's still, and I do it purposely because I want to give people a taste and educate them and start to show them these things, but understand too that a few snippets of a video are still missing full context and missing the full scope of what can actually be done and what you can get out of these things. But I digress a little bit. So yes, Instagram, great place. You can find me there. What I've also done is I launched my own channel of an app where I'm starting to create these programs. So I have what I call my neuropriming warm-ups. I have 3 levels of that I have all my clients do. So if people are interested at a more customized approach and maybe can't see me one-on-one, they can go to my app where I have programs that are very structured and they have assessments, reassessments. So, like my vestibular program in my app, you start with assessments. It has different levels to find out where you're at and where you need to start. And then, based on where you start, that gives you specific workouts to do on that level. So, what I'm trying to do is, even though Instagram is a little incomplete, you see my videos, you might get a little something out of it. I wanted to further that approach to people if they really want to get into this and get something out of it and hopefully learn more how to apply that to their lives. They can go to my app, which is linked to my Instagram. It's my website as well, hybridfitnesstraining.com. That's in my bio on my Instagram. If they click on that, that'll take them directly to my app. They can subscribe to that. They can also, I also have one-time purchase programs where you can buy the program, just a one-time fee, and you have access to that program as long as my app is running, which should be for a long time. And then, obviously, if people want more individual approach, I work with people one-on-one online. I have some online clients, and I also work with people, in person. I'm based in Santa Monica, California. So yeah, my website, hybridfitnesstraining.com, Instagram. My Instagram is also going to have programs in there. I'm going to have my link tree and programs. It also has the link to my app, which has programs that you can subscribe to. Or like I said, you can reach out to me personally and through Instagram or hybridfitnesstrainingla@gmail. So those are the areas people can find me. And try my stuff or ask me questions or, buy my programs and start applying neuro movement and the hybrid fitness training method to their life and lifestyle and, get out of pain, move better, feel better, and, hopefully live a better life. So.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you being on. I hope again, you mentioned Santa Monica. I know too many people got impacted by the fires in that area, so I hope everything with you and
Yeah,
your
yeah, that was
family is
really
okay.
bad. I had a few people. Yeah, I was right behind my gym. I mean, literally, when
Yeah,
this fire started, the hill was orange behind me, and our gym, that whole area, it's still unfortunately, a lot of confusion and it's pretty affected. A lot of people were displaced. So, yeah, that was tough.
I
We're
know too
kind of
many
back
people,
now. We're
Pacific
healing. People
Palisades,
are.
Santa Monica. Man, I know too many people that just is devastated. It's terrible. He talked
Yeah,
about
yeah.
psychological impacts. I mean, these things are just terrible. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's
And that's the other thing. There's the collective consciousness and the nature of that, The more I'm studying this with our energies and the way that we all interact with each other as a society has an effect on us, whether it's locally or globally or, obviously, there's a lot of unfortunate strife going on. I feel like in the world, a lot of negative climate when it comes to just, politics and disasters and just different things going on. And so now all more than ever, people need to be able to tap into their nervous system, live a better life, hopefully heal themselves from some of the trauma and stuff that's going on. So yeah, but yeah, it was tough, but we're bouncing back, and we're back at it. And so yeah.
I appreciate your time and I appreciate all the information. And, thanks for being here. So, thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this was great. I really appreciate you having me on, and I love the work you guys are doing. Like I said, been following you for a while. I send people to your websites, and that's one of the biggest things I'm trying to do with that is share the knowledge and get people the help that they need, and you guys, again, you and a couple other people I think are doing amazing things, and so I'm trying to get the word out there and share that as well. So thank you for having me on and this was great. I really appreciate it.